Hello everybody, Ian, Starship Adventures, and wow, I put out a video about a week and a half ago that has gotten a lot of interest and a lot of back and forth and hundreds of comments and thousands and thousands of views. And so I decided that I wanted to go ahead and respond to a lot of it because there's a lot of people who have come in there and given their opinions on this stuff. And in a few ways, I've been a little swayed by some of it. And in other ways, I've been a little annoyed by some people that are just very close-minded and have very old-fashioned ways of thinking about technology and the market around technology. And so anyway, today I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you here about all of the comments and the discussions going on in the comments of that particular video. I think videos are important. I think responding to videos is equally or more important because what we're basically doing at this point is we're going to go back and rehash through this again. And I'm going to be giving both your opinions and mine and discussing them. And then we'll see how the comments come out. And eventually, if it's warranted, I'll do yet another follow-up video on this video. The video basically was about rigs and how they've just become overly complicated. They've become overly expensive, and they're just out of most people's price range and out of some people's intellect level. And I think that that's counterproductive on a bunch of different levels. I think the whole axiom that this is the smart people's hobby, I think needs to go away. Okay, this is a hobby for people who work hard and study hard, not necessarily for people who are just inherently smart to begin with. And I think that it's important that we make that distinction. If we make it the little exclusionary smart boy club, then we're not going to have that many people to talk to on the radio. And I think that's important. The passion, man, there was a lot of passion in the feedback that I got. I was called some names. I called a few back. It was good. I was happy to see it. I like to see discord. I like to see people who can talk back and forth and not necessarily curse at each other and make threats. And there was none of that, which is good. But I do like to see discord because you know what? It's in that discord where positive change is made. And unfortunately, there's not enough of that in ham radio. No one wants to talk bad about ham radio or the ARRL or the logbook of the world or any of that kind of stuff. So because nobody wants to talk bad about it, it just survives on. It limps on in limbo and in failure because nobody wants to talk about it because it's a hobby and we don't want to talk bad about the hobby. It's unfortunate, but change is made in the discord. Change is made when perceptions are challenged and when history is challenged. And there's just not a lot of that right now in ham radio, and I think it's important. And the way some of these guys in the comments were telling me just flat out, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're stupid. I think it's better if you just don't make these videos anymore. Some of the comments were fairly rude. I left them all in there. I believe in free speech. So you go back and read them if you'd like. I want to take the time today to explore both sides of this debate. And the debate we're talking about is HF rigs and how complicated they are and how expensive they are and how those two things go together. If they weren't so complicated, they wouldn't need to be so expensive. And we can achieve all of the things that are making that radio expensive, for the most part, could be achieved running it through a computer. Also, there's other things we could do, like just make basic radios. Make radios with add-ons where you can add on later when you can the parts that you want. You know, have the basic radio. It transmits, it receives 5 modes, 8 bands, whatever, and it's just a basic radio. That was my premise. And then if you want to add a computer to add filtering, to add different things to it, if you want to add modules onto it, it'd be great to have a radio that you could literally just plug modules into as your hobby expands. But instead, the way these big companies want you to do it is they want you to buy everything up front. Boom, right up front. They want you to spend the $6,000 to $4,000 to $3,000 and buy it right up front. And I think that's really hurting ham radio. We need to, and thank God for swap shops and tailgates and ham fests, because we can still get a lot of people in used equipment that way. Because the new equipment is just out of most people's price range. I mean, who joins a hobby and drops thousands in that? Well, that's true. There's a lot of them out there where you do that, but still, it's expensive. It's a lot of money. I mean, you can go join the local football league for a lot less money than that and buy all your pads and your equipment and your gear. So I want to make sure that there is a path for people who maybe aren't a genius, and there's a path for people who maybe aren't rich. That's all I'm saying. And boy, I got attacked. People don't like when you go up against the status quo. And that's basically what I was doing in this video. It is true that modern transceivers are overly complex. And they are. They're just absolutely overly complex. Most of the stuff, I made a comment that there's features on here that I don't know, that I don't use, that I don't care about. And boy, I got attacked for that because I'm stupid, because I don't know all 129 features in my ICOM radio over here. And it's like, it's not that I don't understand it. It's that I don't use it. I don't need it. The button doesn't need to exist. They got a little teeny power button, which I use all the time. And they got these big, huge, nice knobs all over the front that I've never turned. I don't need them. So I'm just saying it would be intelligent to put the things we use up front, and the things we don't need, take them away or put them in the back or put them on a menu behind a menu. Advanced features like spectrum scopes, digital modes, things like that. They're putting these in all the radios now. That's great. I love waterfalls. I'm a waterfall freak. Okay. I've become one of these people that once you use your first waterfall, it's really hard to go back to a radio that doesn't have a waterfall. I get that. I understand that. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But not every radio should start out with a waterfall. Maybe that's an add-on you plug in later, or you just hook up the computer and there's your waterfall on the computer. It doesn't need to be complicated. Why does it have to be built into the radio? 1,000 buttons, multiple screens. It's a bunch of crap. A lot of people make those points that simple radios like CBs and FRS radios, they're not for serious hobbyers like us. Well, simple radios, there's a place for simple radios. I think there's a long place for simple radios. I think that why do we have to make radios to where, well, just because you cheated to get your license and you just read the answers, which is not really cheating because they give them to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to further gatekeep you by giving you radio equipment that you couldn't possibly figure out in 1,000 years. I mean, is that what we're doing? Because that's what it sounds like in a lot of these comments. One guy said, if you don't know how to use this equipment, give up your license. You shouldn't have it. And I said, I thought the hobby was about learning about radios, not about knowing everything there is to know constantly about radios. Not all hams want every advanced feature in the world. I think that's important to understand. Many of them are unused. Accessories matter, but the simpler the better, okay? We want expansion ports, expansion plugs, abilities to add things later, but we don't necessarily need it all right now. And this is not a dumbing down. That's something that was a common theme in the comments. This is simply a dumbing down of ham radio for idiots that cheated and got their license. And that's not the case at all. Okay, it's not. It's, why do we have to start out with the Cadillac? Okay, let them buy the Xiegu and run that around town for a few weeks, and then they can move up to a Prius. I think it's important that there's a progression, and that's all I'm saying. And I know there is a few radios out there that have less features, but they're still very expensive. Flex makes a computer interface radio, which is really cool. It's like $4,000, okay? It's stupid price. So my computer is going to do all the work, and I'm still going to pay $4,000. It's ridiculous. modern manufacturing, computer integration, these things are allowing for modular designs. They allow for software to handle many of the complex functions that your hardware used to handle in years past. And I think we need to provide radios to people that just want a box that plugs into their computer and still continue to provide the button box over here like this one, which I love that radio, but it's like 1,000 buttons on the front of it. We could still have both. That's another thing that came in the comments telling me that I was going to try to ruin ham radio by taking the knobs away. My God, no one ever said stop making what they're making now. I never said stop making what they're making now. I said, let's make something that appeals to a different crowd within the same hobby and possibly even would get more people to come into the hobby because there's something they can afford. It's that simple. I never said that I wanted to stop making any of the current models. I don't know where that got read into what I said. I even went back and watched my video a couple times to make sure I didn't say something that led people to believe that. I just want to reduce the cluttered panels. I just want to make it simpler for people that want to get in. I'm looking out for the new ham because I got into this 5 years ago, and it is not the most welcome hobby in the world. As a matter of fact, it sucks in that respect. And one of the things is things like this where things are very expensive to get in, and yet they don't need to be that expensive. They're that expensive because that is the way it is in ham radio. There's a lot of different arguments, and we're going to get into a few more of those here in just a minute. I want to talk about pricing and affordability for a minute. One of the common themes in there was that these radios require significant research and development, and they require significant production costs and the costs of shipping and all these different things that add into the high price of these radios and building in something that's going to last for a long time. Really? Modern manufacturing, surface mount technology, automatic assembly, chip DSP, things like that should lower costs significantly, okay? But prices still remain high. Why is that? Because they've always made this much money on ham radios. And every year, they're making radios cheaper and cheaper, not less quality. Please don't get me wrong on this point. The radios that are coming out of Yaesu and ICOM and Kenwood and Elecraft today are the best radios that have ever been made. Okay, I'm not arguing that point. Okay, but it has to be seen that those radios are being built very, very, very much cheaper, more efficiently than they were being built before. So when they say in adjusted dollars, everybody, adjusted dollars. I get sick of the adjusted dollars argument. You want to know why? Because here's why. The adjusted dollars argument, okay? When you add it all up, you're right. You're paying the same amount for a 7-band radio that does 5 modes, 3 modes, whatever. You're paying the same amount of money today, or maybe even a little less, than you paid in 1975 or 1980. But when you bought that radio back then from Heathkit or Elecraft or wherever you bought that radio back then, okay, that profit margin on that radio was only 20%. The profit margin on today's radios is double, triple, quadruple, okay? They're charging you $3,000 for a radio that they manufactured and had shipped to the United States for $300. And that's what I'm talking about. It's greed, okay? It's greed. It's not the adjusted dollars argument, because I'm not arguing that in adjusted dollars they cost the same today as they did in 1980. My argument is these radios are so much cheaper now to build than they were back then. Instead of spending $4,000 on a radio that cost somebody $3,500 to build in tubes and parts and boards and big, huge windings and power supplies. I get all that, okay? I get it. My argument is they're building those radios now for pennies, and they're still selling them for the same thing they were selling them for 40 years ago when they're building them 10 times cheaper. That's my argument, okay? They could sell those radios, especially without all the stupid features that are unneeded. They could sell those radios for a couple $100. It's stupid to spend this much money on these radios when it's not necessary. And could you imagine how wonderful the hobby would be if everyone, when they took their test, didn't have to go get another test to get on HF? Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm for eliminating all of the levels and bullshit that goes along with that, okay? And wouldn't that be nice if everybody right away could take their test and get on HF for a couple $100? Could you imagine where the hobby would be? You know, right now, 60, 70%, depending on the area in the country, never pick up their first radio after getting licensed. Why is that? Because it's just a complicated mess. There's not a lot of help. And I'll tell you what, the biggest problem that we have is the cost of equipment. It's a hobby. I get really sick of the argument that if you just budget wisely, if you just spend your money more wisely, if you just do what you have to do, you would be able to afford those radios too. You mean I'd be able to line somebody's pockets because it's all profit, okay? That's a stupid argument. One guy even told me, hey, I skip lunches so I could buy HF radios. Good for you, dude. I'm not giving up my health so I can buy some bloated, overpriced piece of shit from some other country that is literally charging me 10 times more than what the product cost to make. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. They could produce no frills 100-watt rigs with USB audio, 5, 6, 7 bands. They could do it in $300 or $400. So you have to ask yourself, why have the prices not dropped a lot more than they have? Agreed. There's no other way around it. And the pricing model that they're using is driven by market demand, meaning you're willing to pay it. You're willing to pay the $1,000 for a QRP rig that puts out 10 watts. If you're willing to do that, why would they ever charge less? And that's the problem. You've got so many arrogant people that are just willing to spend the money because they want the status symbol. They want the Yaesu sticker. Whew, man, I'll tell you, it's a mess. I really get sick of the whole just save up your money and buy a good radio. That whole argument is tired. I want to talk a little bit about something else too. Even though I didn't talk a lot about cheap Chinese radios, other than I mentioned that the Chinese are getting into the HF market and they're going to take it over. It's going to happen, 10 years. And I'm glad because it's going to make these companies compete again. Just like they're doing right now with handhelds and now mobiles. These big companies that have been going for many years, they've lost 3/4 of their portable radio market to Chinese radios. Why? Because people are sick of paying $400 for a handheld radio. It doesn't need to be that much because they're building the things for $20 a piece. So why not sell them for $30 a piece? And that's what we're starting to see. Electronics have become a lot cheaper. Now, whether you buy Japanese electronics that are full of Chinese parts, or you buy Chinese electronics that are full of Chinese parts, you're still buying a Chinese radio one way or the other. You don't want to know how many Chinese parts are in the new Yaesu radios. It's most. And I mean, you can fool yourself all you want, but it is what it is. I don't understand the hate towards Chinese radios. I mean, I get the geopolitics and I don't get into geopolitics, so I'm not going to discuss that. But I hate the argument when people say, it's child labor. That's just your way of saying you don't like Chinese radios. You're either racist or you're bigoted towards a certain kind of radio or whatever it is. The whole spurious transmissions, that hasn't been happening for a long time. They put out 3 watts when they say they put out 10. That 11-watt radio right there puts out 11 watts on the 2-meter call channel and 10 watts on 440. So, okay, The whole thing with that is gone now. And I'm sick of hearing people talk about how crappy Chinese radios are. They have stepped up the game, the audio quality, the transmit power, the receive sensitivity. They have made major advancements. And most people still, when they talk about a Chinese radio, they talk about a first or second generation UV5R. And we're talking about an entire rebuild. We're talking about several entire rebuilds now. We're talking about everything about these radios is different than the ones that you're talking about. But that's all we still hear about out there because people hate Chinese radios. Who hates Chinese radios? People that have money to buy Japanese radios. Whatever box it's in, it's still Chinese parts. I don't know why hams prioritize features over quality, features over usability. I don't get it, but they love the features. Even with the Chinese radios, they're way overdone with the features. Many people say ICOM and Yaesu it's just a higher standard. The receivers are better, the transmitters are better. That's why we pay so much. Well, the technology to make really good transmitters and receivers has gotten a lot cheaper. And so we're going to see that whole dynamic change. Not all Chinese radios are low quality. In fact, most of what Baofeng is putting out now to America. Now, there's different qualities that come out of these factories and different things. I'm talking about what's being shipped here on Amazon. Amazon with the 100% return policy. Always suggest using Amazon. They will never argue on a return. They take it back. You get your money. But when it comes to these radios, I order it, I get it. It comes in and it works. It's what's promised. It's the wattage that's promised. It does everything it says it does. And I got news for you. Baofeng is kicking Yaesu's ass in the portable radio market right now. They're offering radios like that, the UV25 right there, with a battery that lasts days and days. And it transmits on 3 bands and receives on 6. It even receives aircraft. I mean, they're making things right now that just literally do things, all kinds of things that the Yaesus don't do. So they're actually trying to beat Yaesu to their own game of over-featuring everything. The negative perceptions of Chinese radios is based on a bias. I'm sorry, it is. It sometimes is based in reality. Early Baofengs had spurious transmissions. Early Baofengs promised 5 watts and put out 3.5 or 4. Not the case anymore. They've stepped up to the game because they know they need to step up to the game. All right, let's talk for a little while about market dynamics because that's really at the root of this thing, right? I mean, the bottom line is they have to sell radios to survive. So the market dynamics of this, the industry direction becomes pretty important. What my commenter said was the amateur market is small compared to the land mobile radio market or the LMR market. And so manufacturers prioritize government contracts, and this drives up the prices of ham radios. I'm not going to completely disagree with that point, but I will tell you that the amateur radio market is completely underserved right now by manufacturers because they seem to focus on these high-end models, ignoring demand, affordable, simple rigs. And I think it's important that that they look at this stuff too. The government market, the LMR market, is not a feature-rich market. Matter of fact, most Motorola radios that government people use have a set of channels in it, and that's how it's used. There's no user programming at all on the radio. And so I really don't buy the argument that they spend all their time on LMR and they don't spend any time on ham radio because look at the crap they're putting in these radios. They're spending way too much time. We want more of an LMR type, a simple type radio that functions and is simple without a million features in it. So I don't really buy that argument. I understand the basis of it, and I'm not saying I totally disagree with it, but I'm not buying that as a major argument. He says hams that want quality have got to compete with high-end government buyers that are willing to spend an unlimited amount of money. Look, I'm retired from the fire service. I know what they spend. They spend mad crazy money on stuff that's not worth it. But you have to buy the best equipment, and that's what it costs. Economic realities mean that many hams can't afford premium radios. That's the bottom line. And I don't really buy that the government radio market is driving up the ham radio price for ham radios. They're mostly built by two different companies. I mean, most of your LMR companies like Midland and Motorola are not competing in the amateur radio space. And Yaesu and ICOM are not really competing in the government space that I'm aware of. There is some crossover with Kenwood and a few others, but I just don't see that as being a major push here, that because governments are willing to spend so much on radios that amateur radio people are just screwed. I don't buy that point. Manufacturers could innovate here. They could innovate with modular, cost-effective designs, and they could do it without like sacrificing, the quality of what they're putting out. They could put out the best receiver ever with the best 200-watt transmitter ever, because it doesn't have all that other bullshit on it. It's just a simple radio, And I think that's important. I don't think, the bottom line here, I don't think the government contracts, the high-priced LMR markets and things like that really influence the fact that we're spending way too much for ham rigs. I really think it's two different markets. I think these radio manufacturers are out of touch with what hams actually want. I'm going to the Huntsville Ham Fest, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to talk to all of these manufacturers. And I'm not going to hard question them. I'm not going to be like some media prick, but I'm going to ask them, why won't you guys do this? And I want to see what they say. And I'll be providing that to you guys in a video. We're going to be doing a lot of videos from the Huntsville Ham Fest this year. I want to know. I want to know why won't you, if so many hams want this. And let me tell you what, as much as all the negative comments I got on my video, there was a lot of negative comments. There was a lot of positive comments, and the thumbs up were running 93, 94% thumbs up on my video. A lot of people believe, like I do, that these radios are too overpriced and too complicated. And so even though the loud people in the room are not the majority of people want ham radios that they can afford, and they're not full of buttons they don't need. And that's the bottom line there. Community attitudes and gatekeeping. I think this is probably the most important point to this whole video. I probably should have put it at the beginning. One of the things that they kept saying was that, hey, amateur radio is a technical hobby. It requires effort. It requires mastering of things. It requires knowing manuals and understanding electronics and math and that people need to be very, 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 very smart to even get into this hobby. And if you can't simply read a manual and then walk up to something with 93 buttons and use it proficiently, then perhaps you should not get in the hobby. And that's basically, I got this from a number of different people. This is a feeling in the hobby. What this is, it's elitism. It's gatekeeping. It's people that say, look, it's a gentleman's club. Look, this is my club, and I'm in the club now, and how I build worth in my club is to keep other people out. And that's literally what's being done here. And it's the big boy, rich boy club. It's the big, I buy these very expensive radios, and I like to brag about my radios. Every freaking time I get on the radio, someone's on, I've got an ICOM 793. I don't care. The fact is, I care about your signal. I care about your antenna. I care about how you're making the trip. I don't give a shit about the radio. If any good radio can make the trip, it's the antenna, it's the coax, it's the grounding, it's everything else that's really more important than the radio. All right? And all the filtering, really? Not hearing too well? You need all that filtering to be able to hear people? Because I don't use any filtering. I use the radio I listen to sideband straight up. right after it's demodulated. And I don't need all that shit. And so that needs to be available for people out there. One of the criticisms is that they believe that simple radios undermines the hobby because it's a smart hobby. It's for smart people. And so if we dumb down the hobby or make the hobby easier for people, then all we're really doing is we're dumbing down our hobby and we're making it more. Again, this is just more of that elitism again. Accessibility and affordability strengthen the hobby. I don't know how you can argue with that. And most of the time when I try to argue with people about that, they give me a hard time. They call me a name, walk away, because there's no argument there. Accessibility and affordability make the hobby better. Gatekeeping and elitism are what's destroying the hobby. It's that simple. And this whole expensive rig thing leads into that. You know, it's complexity versus simplicity. That's the bottom line. You know, complexity versus simplicity. It's cost versus accessibility. It's quality versus affordability. And the bottom line here is we want to serve everyone. So we want to build the best radio ever for $10,000. And we want to build a simple 100-watt radio that someone can use and expand over time for a couple $100. It's that simple. We want to emphasize the importance of respectful dialogue too. In my chat, if someone's being sarcastic to me, I give it back to them. And I guess you've seen that. If someone is cool and they're talking respectfully to me, they get exactly what they get back. I respond to all of my comments, and I respond to every one of them in the tone that you wrote your comment in. And then I get pissed when I get back why are you so snarky? Why are you such a smartass? I'm giving you the same exact tone you gave me. You just don't realize it because you wrote it. Live with it. I don't believe in being nice to people who are not being nice to me. So my tone is always the same. It's the same as your tone. I want my viewers to share their experiences. I want you to feel safe to go into a chat room and tell us what you think. Even in ham radio. Let me tell you something. Ham radio, the biggest problem in ham radio is nobody talks bad about ham radio. And like I said at the beginning of this whole thing, and I'll bring us back to the beginning. If we don't talk about what's wrong, we'll never fix it. It's that simple. You got to talk about what's wrong. I don't know. If you didn't watch the original video, go back and watch the one that started all the controversy. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know. I got to tell you guys, when it comes to HF rigs, we all need one. Whether we're moderately intelligent or a genius, whether we are rich or poor, everyone needs a radio for them. And that's the bottom line. Anything else is gatekeeping and elitism. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I hope this clears it up. I look forward to your comments, and we'll see how that goes. And I may have another video. We'll see how that goes. All right, everybody. That does it. From Southwest Florida, Starship Studios, my name's Ian on Starship Adventures. I hope to see you down the log or on our next adventure. We'll see you next time.